In this video, I'm going to be talking about Aristotle and his view on the soul and life after death. Now, he doesn't say very much in comparison to Plato, so this should be a short video. So let's start. Well, with Aristotle, he was taught by Plato, so he knew all of Plato's things on the world of the form and the charioteer example, the slave boy, all of that. And what Aristotle did is he rejected it because he essentially said there wasn't much proof or evidence for it, and it just made no sense to believe in it. In essence, Aristotle was a bit of an empiricist. He was more of a scientist, whereas Plato is more of a type of theologian. That not a theologian, but there is a distinction between them, and I don't know how to articulate. I just know it. But anyway, so essentially, what I'm trying to say is that Plato taught Aristotle his ideas. Aristotle rejected it, saying there's not sufficient evidence for it. And then Aristotle also claimed that a man can only philosophize about the physical. He can't philosophize about the metaphysical. It's illogical and it's absurd. It does not make sense. So how does Aristotle go about looking about the soul and life after death? Well, what he starts off is that in our lives, if we look at us when we're 8, 18, and 80, let's say, what makes that person them in all three stages of their life? Well, essentially what it is our soul. But for Aristotle, the soul and the body are not different things. That's why Aristotle's not a dualist. He's a monist. He believes the body and the soul, they're one. They're one thing. They're not completely different. They're not even different. They are just one thing. And so, unlike Plato, he goes on to say that this soul, which is a thing that keeps us, which will keep me, Camilla, for my whole life as the same person, can be explained in natural terms. We don't need to look at the metaphysical realm, the divine, any of these things to explain it. So what he says, the soul is what makes me individual. Simple enough. He's a monist, that's one thing. Then he goes on to say that there are various types of souls, and he starts off by saying, well, animals have a soul and humans have a soul. The human soul is superior to the animal souls. He says that animal souls, essentially all they are is they make animals respond to sensory stimuli. So when an animal sees food, it makes the soul makes that the animal go and get the food and eat it. Whereas humans are higher souls because our souls allow us to reason. We have the ability to reason, and this is what makes us higher than animals. And also, the soul is not it's not like independent of the body. They both are completely dependent on one another. That's why he's a monist, and that's why it can help us to reason, or if we're an animal, help us to respond to sensory stimuli. So there are three parts to the soul. So just like for Plato, there are three parts to the soul, except for Plato it's reason, appetite, and emotion. For Aristotle, there are three parts, and he says if you're an animal, you have two of these parts, and if you're a human, you have three parts. So the three parts to the soul are, the first is the neurative, and this is the soul moving our body to go and take action to get food. So animals have this when they respond to food and sensory stimuli. Humans have this. The second aspect is the locomotive, and basically all this locomotive does is it allows our body to move and, be present, and essentially that. Animals can move, they can be present, so they also have the locomotive. And the third part of the soul, which animals don't have, is the intellectual aspect. And essentially what the intellectual aspect is our soul allowing us to reason and think. So you have the neurative, which is food, locomotive, which is to move, and then you have the intellectual, which is the ability to think. And then Aristotle believed that this last bit is what makes us human, and altogether the soul is what makes us us. That's essentially his theory. I think I've said it like too many times in this video, but essentially that's what makes us us, and the body can't survive without the soul, and the soul can't survive with the body. It's not very clear what he says happens to the soul or the body as a life after death, because remember, he only philosophizes about the physical, not the metaphysical. But the thing is, if the soul and the body are essentially one thing, they're part of each other, dependent. When we die, our bodies go, they decay, and they basically just become destroyed, then obviously our soul would. So it seems like Aristotle would not believe in an afterlife, especially because he rejected Plato's theory of the world of the forms, etc. So one of the good things about his theory is that it's logical and explains what makes me unique. So unlike Plato, you're just like, what's the difference? If in my past life I was Henry VIII and here I am, what's the difference between me and Henry VIII? Well, clearly there is a difference, but how is this linked to the soul? This theory of Aristotle is logical, and he is following a bit of like the Dawkins thing that materialist stance, even though he's a monist, not materialist. But it's also more useful because he differentiates us from animals, and that's really positive as well. Although they're showing that there's various types of soul doesn't really seem like a very useful or meaningful theory, because what would you do with that information except for the fact feel reassured that you're better than an animal? And it also could be seen to be a weakness, because it could show that he's so unsure on what the soul actually is that he said there's so many different types of this. Anyways, thank you for watching this video. Please visit my blog.